So we had some recap, and then he talked about Extreme Vulcan, what would come after it, and Gold River was kind of trolling about the potential of them releasing Extreme Beatrice, Extreme Coxaton, incredible April shit, amazing Iliacon, unbelievable comment, but this was trolling. And so he was hinting at the possibility of reusing story dungeon bosses that were really well made, but it's like a fleeting encounter where we meet them once, but we don't like see them again. Like especially this guy comes to mind from Annika. His design was really insane, but he was not really reused. Barring perhaps, I don't know, maybe he makes appearance in like cubes and tower maybe. Yeah, it was flashbang, but yeah, Banda his name was. The design was insane. So maybe they could make use of resources from these to make something kind of like Extreme Volta. And he was talking a lot about providing content for endgame players who don't have much to do between bigger content releases and providing them with an opportunity to claim rewards that are befitting for endgame players. Because the reward structure was something that was quite the complaint between endgame players. There's no big motivation for raising a character to endgame levels. There's no drive. So including more content pieces like this and being able to claim rewards on those would appease, in a sense, the endgame players. And then, let's see, Chaos Dungeon and Guardians, reviewing the numbers. So he was talking about how the overall time that needed to be spent for each Chaos Dungeon and Guardian raids went down by a lot. Definitely Guardian raids by half, because you only need to do it once instead of twice, and then a bit more than 20% reduction in the speed at which you can clear these Chaos Dungeons. But the flip side of it was that more people are now doing their dailies much more actively because they're enthralled by the prospect of gaining these ember fragments. So some players were expressing fatigue in the sense that they were doing more Chaos Dungeons than before, but I guess this fatigue is more or less something good. Because now they want to do it and they feel excited by these drops. And then a lot more gold is being pumped into the economy because of these changes in dailies. It's mainly because of these ember fragments. It's because players are doing way more homework than before. And this is something to be wary about because it causes gold inflation. And then it has an effect on players raising their characters to higher eye level brackets because perhaps they want to claim better rewards from their dailies, because they have more gold in their pockets. But then he talked about how there's this need for Lost Ark economy to change. It won't do well going into the future to just keep reducing the supply of gold in the economy. Things like doing these nerfs on gold on Vulcan and Vicus and then Clown. That will not suffice going into the future. There's a need to increase the desire to consume in the economy so as to balance it out with the increased supply. So that's something that they're looking into. They don't have a concrete plan for this, but it's on their minds. And then he talked about how QOLs are great, but at the same time, they can harm the atmosphere of MMORPGs. Like, for instance, yeah, over here, actually. Yeah, here. So, in the old days, people would gather up at the city to interact, to communicate, to chat, to build memories like this because, for instance, you had to go to the Chaos Dungeon structure in order to do your Chaos Dungeons. And so you would see a lot of people gathered up there. And because they would all gather up there, they would do these activities together. And perhaps providing with too many QOLs, as is the case for the unified dungeon menu, it removes the need to go to cities. So you would see less people gathered up in city spaces, and perhaps that would harm the atmosphere of MMORPGs. But Gold River said that they would keep providing us with convenience features, and instead, so that we can have these special memories and moments together, that they would work towards providing events that would allow us to come together, like they did for the summer vacation event, like they did for the Korean Liberation Day event. A venue, an event so that people can gather up and enjoy together. So that's how they're going to go into the future. They're going to keep providing us with convenience QL features, but also provide us with venues for gathering up. And then this was very nice. That was kind of touching because we in the Korean server, we did have these players who would consecrate their time for letting the players know what kind of wandering merchants spawned at what location and what items they were selling. There were players who really just sacrificed their own time for the greater good. And now that we have that new wandering merchant feature where you can now see everything from the world map, now their service will no longer be needed. But he took the time to list up the players who are behind it all, who are helping the players. Because they would go to the unified Discord and plug in the values, and like every hour they would do this. It was very insane. He himself admitted to receiving help from these players by looking at the unified Discord. And that was very nice. Like, just going out of his way to do that. And then we had the execution of gates. So now he told us today what kind of gates would be taken out of the game from the Legion raids. So first of all, Vicus. Gate 1 will be removed. So we only have to do 2 gates in Vicus. Gates 2 and 3. Which will now become gates 1 and 2, of course. So we'll only have to fight Vicus, not her underlings. And then, thank God, the bird is going away from Kangol. So we'll only have 3 gates. And they also said that they would nerf TN, which will now be the first gate. Saying that experienced players didn't have much of an issue, but newer players or learning players were having a hard time dealing with TN's patterns. And it will be a roadblock, an obstacle, trying to go up, trying to climb up the content. Well, that's very nice. And then the long-awaited Brel. And this is the result. So gates 1, 3, 4, and 6 will remain. And I think he talked about how they would alleviate some of the pressure during the Star Mech in Gate 3. So Gates 2 and 5 will be removed. But they did say that the Procol practice feature in Trixion would be maintained as like a relic of this time. Tianis? No, I refuse to call it by that name. It's Tien. And then he talked about things to think about. So problems that needed some addressing. And he brought up the issue of Chaos Gate, of secret maps, and ghost ships, which are scheduled contents that you have to do on a pretty much a daily basis along with the field bosses. And right, in the West especially, there's been a lot of outcry regarding how the game has way too many scheduled content pieces. And so his then he talks about Chaos Gate statistics. A lot more people are going to red gates than other gates. And then a lot of people are not using their blue maps. And not a lot of people are going to Ghost Ship. Like only 5% of people at 1415 to 1490 eye level bracket are going to Ghost Ship, which is a very miserable number. And only 40% above 1580 are going to Ghost Ships. So his idea to solve this issue was to combine everything into all and pump everything into Chaos Gates. So the new design of Chaos Gates, and there will be versions for each theme. I think this the Red Gate. It'll be very simplified, so you just climb up and arrive at this platform. Large platform, and it seems to be like it's gonna be just a hack and slash content where players converge, like fight against mobs that are converging from the outsides, perhaps. And the rewards for this Chaos Gate will be boosted. He did mention that they can remove Secret Map and Ghost Ship, but Chaos Gate are kind of an integral part of Lost Ark story, so they needed them to stay, but they wanted to make the experience overall better when dealing with scheduled content. So they're going to boost the rewards and make the overall experience much, much more manageable, much less annoying. And he put a deadline to this. He said it would arrive within the next 2 months. So at the very latest, it would arrive by late October. Hope it's not equalized. No, it's not equalized. So they're looking into different avenues as to how this would pan out. But he said either you get to select which eye level Chaos Gate you want to enter. Say you want to enter 1415, even though you're above 1580, maybe. But for whatever reason, but or they like force you into 1580 Chaos Gate if you're 1580. So they're looking into that. We'll see what they come up with. And then they also mentioned horizontal content. So a lot of players, newer players especially, having a hard time with these horizontal piece of content. And he showed us the statistics for the Korean server. So for players who've recently arrived at 1540, the statistics are pretty bad. Like for instance, less than 1 Ignia completed, only 4 Omnium stars, less than 20 Island Souls, skill points 350 out of 420, and then LOS 2.5 out of 30. So definitely it's not a problem for an experienced player's point of view because you've already spent a lot of time gathering these up. But from a newer player's perspective, these are a huge roadblock. And so they're going to in the future. So this is not they didn't show us with concrete plans as to what they would do, but they said that they would alleviate some of the difficulties when it comes to these content pieces. So Giant Heart, Sea Treasure, Masterpiece, Island Soul, Omnium Star, Tower, Rapport, Quests, and Una Reputation and Adventure Tome. So these things will be more or less subsidized, I guess. We'll have to see what they come up with. And then they said these three categories, there will not be any subsidies. So Music Box, Mokoko Seeds, and World Tree Leaves, these will remain the same. Man, it's really fair. These should be left the way they are. So maybe some sort of reallocation in terms of where certain key rewards are. I would like to see, like, a lot of players were complaining a lot about skill points being locked behind how many igneas and how many, like, where are they? Where are the skill points? Like, yeah, having to do tower and all. Yeah, some sort of restructuring in terms of rewards would be very much needed. Or I don't know, they make it very easy to do these things. And then he hinted at the direction in which they want to take horizontal content. So they want to focus on providing story content, of course, main horizontal content in Lost Ark, and then Music Box questline, which I really like, which helps enrichen the world, the Lost Ark universe, by giving us with providing us with stories for less important, more normal people in Arcasia's world. And then so all these things really make the experience of living in Arcasia much, much richer. And then islands like the Battle Royale island, a very nice piece of horizontal content. And then there's also a drive to play it because of vertical rewards as well. And then special events like the summer vacation event and the Korea Liberation Day event. Things like that provide us with this romantic feeling of being in an MMORPG. So it's something really that is difficult to find in other games. This experience that can be provided because it's an MMORPG, the experience of experiencing content together alongside other players so that we can build these special memories. So that's what I want to see too going into the future. I want to see more of that. And then Thaymine. So the question was whether Thaymine is going to be a festivity or is it going to be a funeral? So is the raid itself going to be great? Is it going to be bad? Is it going to be too difficult? Is it going to be too easy? And depending on where it hits the mark, it will spell hope or doom for Lost Ark going into the future. And following the Staymine update, there are issues that they need to be worried about. This one addresses how for newer players it's difficult to follow up, to climb up and catch up to the newest endgame content. Things like gatekeeping, things like having a hard time finding prog groups, and then difficulties in terms of gearing up, of course, and endgame content feeling so far away because there's so many things that lead up to them. Like if you're a newer player today, you have to climb up from Vulcan and then Vicus, Clown, Brel, Kangol, Akan, Voldyke, and then Daymine, and then all other things to all the Guardians. You have to learn how to deal with Challenge Guardians too, Challenge Abyss. All these things add up and can lead to pressure on the newer players, and they can feel daunted by this mountain of obstacles. So that's another thing they need to be worried about. And yeah, just the learning curve, very steep because of the sheer amount of things. The whole sum. Because if you look at what you have to learn from a newer player's perspective, these are all the things. Just looking at the important vertical content. So Vulcan with the destruction, the counters, the fear, the stagger checks, Vicus with the gauge system, with the waffle, with the black and red orbs, and like going to the right number of wings, and Medusa, and then tentacles at the 50 line mark. Clown with the clown gauge, the stagger checks, the dance, and then the maze, and then the Marios and the showtime, and then Brel, the stagger checks, the counter, gate 3 stars and labyrinth, and putting the right shapes inside of what's her name? Astrot or something. And then now it goes to gate 4, like the red, blue, yellow mix, and then gate 6, meteor timings, and then Chammi, and then meteor counters and all. Kangol with the electrocution in Tien. And then in Priuna, the red, blue, green mech. Following into Lariel with the mirror mech. Iliakan with the gauge. And the infamous lantern pattern, and then lantern mech in gate 3 as well. And then Voldyke with all the emphasis on counter, stagger, and destruction and all. So all these things are very towering roadblocks for newer players. So they introduced the possibility. Ashtarote. Oh yeah. The possibility of soloing a lot of these contents. Because a lot of the pressure comes from having to go into these content pieces in a group. So having to prog it with a group is where a lot of the pressure points come from for newer players. The fear of messing a mech up and inducing a wipe for the raid. It just doesn't give you a good vibe. And you might be more or less afraid to go in and prog content because of the fear of causing disturbance to others. And so soloing content like, say, earlier ones like Vulcan, Vicus is something they're looking into, and they're welcoming feedback from players as to how to make this a possibility, whether this is the direction they want to go with. I think he's adamant about making this a possibility, especially because I think Western players have been expressing a lot of frustration at progging content, like the inability of being able to find prog groups, and then just the pressure of having to do it in a group format. But then again, like making a lot of these content pieces available in a solo format means that they have to deal with issues such as not having a support alongside you because you're not in a group, and then also supports themselves. What do they do? Since they're built so that they're uh, less effective at doing DPS themselves. But the vision he's drawing is that for endgame, at the very least, it will remain a cooperative game. But for earlier raids, they're looking at the possibility of, well, the possibility of providing a soloable option. So learning without any pressure and growing at a slow but steady pace is what they're looking towards going into the future. And endgame content, of course, will remain cooperative. And then, so that remains a possibility. It's like a vision they want to take going into the future, the possibility of soloing content. And then we talked about, oh, next slide. Wait, he really made that slide short. So there are problems that need to be solved going into the future, and he addresses some of them. So 3 main things: the entropy issue, the feeling of progression on support, so gearing up on a support not feeling as rewarding, being the second issue, and then the third one, reward structure for endgame players. So regarding the entropy issue, his verdict was that they're going to remove entropy, and the problem with doing that is really not easy because a lot of things are tied into entropy. It's not as easy as just removing the set. They need to come up with some sort of replacement for it, and they need to change a lot of tripods, and there's also the problem of the ambush master engraving. And so I bet they're going to try and come up with ways to make this, to realize this, making this less obstructive. And Master Baller too, yeah. I forgot about Master. Yeah, that's also entropy. And then support growth issues. Now, this is a very difficult issue in itself too, because supports in the current game are pretty much overpowered. He said you don't even need to look at the stats. Just look at how parties are formed. If there is no support, then the raid group cannot start. That's just telling of how important supports are in the current Lost Ark system, how powerful they are. So providing supports with ways to like deal damage themselves or making their buffs stronger is not going to work because they're already very overpowered. But he was looking into avenues to show the effectiveness of supports, like allowing them to see the contribution that they're providing through their attack buffs to the overall damage, which is the idea that I was personally having too. Like, the feedback on growth on DPSs is immediate because you're able to see the change in numbers when you go into raids. But for supports, there's no such feedback. You only get the radiant number, at the very least. Like, before, that was not even there. But now you can see the radiant numbers at the end of the MVP screen, so you can have an idea as to how much you contributed. But it's not enough, really. It's very vague. So perhaps making the numbers more apparent within the raids could be a solution, and that's what he was hinting at. And then endgame player rewards, introducing more raids content for endgame players and providing rewards like they did in Extreme Vaulton, providing that 15k gold and the juicy rewards. Things like that that can motivate endgame players to keep honing, to keep playing the game, to feel motivated are things they need to look into going into the future. Let's see. And then other problems they need to address. Skin effect bugs. I wasn't sure what he was hinting at over here. But he said that for this particular bug, they would just maintain it, not make any fixes because players were liking it. I'm not sure what bug it is. Is it how like it looks shiny? Yeah, maybe. There's like this glow. And then for wandering merchants, there are some improvements they need to make still. And he also talked about this bug with whenever maintenance occurs, something about wandering merchants not functioning as they wanted. And then also allowing you to take the ship, the ferry, to wherever you want. Because in the current version, for instance, if you want to travel to Artillerist from Rohendel, you have to stop at North Vern perhaps, and then go to Artillerist, which doesn't fall in line with the conveniences, the QLs they're providing. They made everything so much more convenient, but they still left this piece of inconvenience, so it doesn't make sense. So they're gonna make improvements to that. So that's something to work on going into the future. And then Daymine Raid. They gave a name to this patch, just like they did for Belshazzar update 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was called Astalgia update. This time, they're calling it the Eclipse update for Daymine. And it is a big update with all of these features being included in this update. So we have Legion Raid Daymine itself. We have a new farming system called the Transcendence system with this Minesweeper board, which probably a lot of RNG with elixirs, probably kind of like elixirs. So a way to power up as a reward structure for endgame players. A new Guardian Vescal, the Bat, and then new Chaos Dungeon, a new Express for players to raise a new character. Second wave of Music Box quest lines. Stronghold upgrades. We'll see what that is. And Chaos Gate update. And let's see. And then he talked about how they're going to do an offline event on the 9th. So the Saturday before the Daymine update. There's going to be an offline event held at a movie theater. It's actually pretty close to where I am. So I will also place in an application. But yes, they're going to do a showcase for Daymine. And he mentioned that they're going to bring in the 3 directors, and he used this image of them, which is pretty funny. And then Ilios last concert. So there's going to be an encore event for the summer vacation event that occurred at the Bikini Island. So the concerts have been ongoing, but I think they're going to add a last number to the concerts that are being held at the Bikini Island to celebrate the end of this summer vacation. It's going to be tomorrow, but I will not be here tomorrow, sadly enough. So I'll have to catch the event later. And then they invited Song Ha-jung, the guitarist, legendary guitarist, to perform Lost Ark songs here. So yeah, that's a good recap of what was talked about in this live stream. I will leave out the part 2 elements. They get very deep into interpreting story elements, especially the music. Yeah, that's my recap.